Hello friends, welcome to JavaEE JSP tutorial. In this video, we are going to see how to use JSF and JSP with managed bin. So first we will learn about the managed bin. Managed bin can be seen as a normal Java bin with the extra responsibility of processing the user input. So the managed bin can store the form field information. So that's what here in this example we are going to see. Then JSF API makes use of managed bins to perform user input processing. So in the last video we saw how JSF stored the value inside a standard variable or a standard data type, string data type. Here we are going to take form field data and store those form field data in a managed bin. So a managed bin may have one or more field, and we will see how this mapping, all those stuff will work with managed bin. When user submits a JSF managed form, managed bin plays vital role of transferring the HTML form field data to Java class. So Java class, in the sense, it's a bin. It may have some property and fields. So there will be 2 or 3 fields. Then each field is represented by a property. The managed bin can also decide the execution flow on the server side, acting as a controller. Controller in the sense, when form is submitted, we already know that JSF means there is a faces servlet, and faces servlet can make use of managed bin, and managed bin can control the execution flow. The JSF servlet also can help in controlling the workflow or the execution flow. Managed bin can also decide the execution flow, so it can act as a controller as well. By using JSF tags, form field data can be moved from the input field in the sense, here it is the HTML form field, we can say, from HTML form field to the Java bin, which is living in the application server. So this is one direction, from form field to the Java bin, which is living in the server. Also from the Java bin to form field. So both the directions are possible. We can take data from the form field and store it inside the managed bin, and when required we can retrieve data from the managed bin and display that in the HTML page. For example, the JSF tag h output text. So we know that h output text, we used that in our previous example also. So the h output text is a one directional JSF tag, so which will read the bin property and pushes it to the browser session. And the next one is h input text. So as the name suggests, it will retrieve the data from the HTML form field, so that's a read, as well as it can retrieve data from the Java bin and pushes it to the form field. So h input text, at runtime it will get transformed to a HTML input text field. So we already saw that in the previous example. So data flow can occur in two directions. So one direction is from HTML form field to JavaBean property. The other direction is from JavaBean property to HTML form field. So if you see, when a form is submitted from a form field, the data is read by the JSF tags and the API. Then it will be submitted to, or we can say stored to a JavaBean. So this is one direction. From form field, form is submitted, and JSF tags and the API will retrieve the form field and stores that inside a JavaBean. So we can call this as a modeling phase in the sense it retrieves the data and stores it here. Then during the rendering phase, the data will be retrieved from the managed bean, via the JSF tags and the API. Then it will be given to the form field. So both the direction of data flow will be possible in terms of H input text. So form field H input text submits the data via JSF tags to JavaBean. Then during the rendering phase, it can even retrieve from the same data source. Here it's a managed JavaBean. From there it can retrieve and can push that to the form field. So both the above tags, output text as well as input text, depends on the value attribute which takes the data. So this is where we can use the expression and we can tie a internal variable or bean, all those stuff. So value is the important attribute on input text as well as the output text. So previously we saw how we used the value. We used the value with the hash. Then we defined our variable name, right? Value equal to. So here in this tutorial, since we are going to use managed bean, here in this value attribute, we will use bean. So we will see how we use the bean and how it will get instantiated, all the stuff in this tutorial. So here, if you see, first we create a bean called customer. So this is our bean class name, customer, and it contains three fields: customer ID, customer name, and location zip. Next, if you see, we have a getter version and a setter version for the customer ID. Then getter and setter version for the customer name, getter and setter version for the location zip. So if you see, since we have getter and setter version for these fields, the property can be accessed by the H input text, because H input text is a two-directional flow, right? And here if you see, we defined a method and publish string get customer info, and if you see the flavor here, get smaller case, set smaller case, then cust ID. So C should be caps here, ID. So here in the field it is smaller case, but when we are forming the property, C should be caps. The same goes for other cust name, but here C is caps. And location zip, In the field it is lowercase, but here it is uppercase. The same way here, even though there is no field, here we formed a setter method, get customer info. We followed the same notation, get, then C caps and I caps. And if you see, there is no setter version here. That means it's a read-only property. Since it's a read-only property, it won't suit well for H input text, but it suits for H output text, right? Because the output text is one directional. That means it can read data from the bean and pushes that to the browser session. And if you see, our bean customer supports 4 information. So one is customer ID, customer name, location zip, and customer info. And if you see, the direction for this is a 2-dimensional. That means a 2-way direction. So data can be retrieved from the form field and stored here, or it can be retrieved and goes out to the form. The same goes for this. Same goes for this. And for customer info, it's just read only. We cannot store, but we can retrieve. But when you look at here, get customer info, here we are simply formatting the string. First we are setting info as empty, then we are reading each internal member here, and we are checking if there is a value in it. Then we are forming a string at runtime. So it will come like customer ID here, customer ID, then an hyphen, then a customer name, hyphen, customer name, comma, location zip. So this is how we are formatting the information, and we are sending it when user makes use of this one directional info, get customer info, I mean. Alright, now our bean is ready. To recap it, we have 4 property. In that, 3 is read and write, and 1 is read only. I mean the customer info is read only. Alright. So once the bean is defined, we create a JSP page, and if you see here in the JSP page, we are using our tag lib directive to tell that this is a JSF supported JSP page. So in the previous example also we saw this. The prefix is F, and this is JSF core, and H, JSF HTML. Alright, here HTML head, title, body, all those stuff. So inside the body we are using F. F is from JSF core, then H form, and we know how it will get transformed into HTML form. And here if you see customer ID inside the H form, so this customer ID is a static one, and inside we are using a JSF tag H input text. So we know that this is a two directional. That means data can move from this form field to bean, and from bean data can be retrieved also. Here input text ID, I mean input text ID, we are giving it as a cust ID. Then here if you see, we are using our bean directly, customer.customer ID. So that means here some configuration is required, and how we configure the bean so that JSF will understand the existence of bean. Those stuff we will see when we are going to demo. So in the demo we have to use the we have to place some entry in the configuration file. Using the JSF tool itself we can modify that configuration file, that we will see when we go to demo. But for now here you can see customer. So this is the bean and we will map it to the JSF. In the demo we will map it, and so that means the bean is available here, customer.customer ID. That's how we are specifying it here. Hash, that's the syntax, and variable if you see customer. So this instance is available, customer ID we are mapping. So H input text, we know that at runtime this will get transformed into HTML input field, and we are mapping that with our managed bean property customer ID. Then customer name, location zip, and if you see here command button, get customer info. So here we are actually reading the information and displaying it. Now this will run in two phases. When we are running it for the first time, then it will run for a second time also. When we are running it for the first time, the form field data, let's say customer ID, then customer name and zip. So this stuff will get read and stored inside our bean. So during the model phase, whatever user enter here, first user will get the page. So when user gets the page, at that time there is nothing stored in the bean side. Why? Because the form is displayed for the first time. So for the first time when form is displayed, when the execution goes here, it knows that there is a input ID. Remember, the execution goes through faces servlet, right? So because in the URL we will have faces, in the URL we will have faces, and it will go to the faces servlet, and faces servlet will take care of reading this JSP or processing this JSP. So it will transform this into a HTML input field and it renders it here. So this is the first time, and when user submits it, so all fields are displayed and mapping also happens. When user clicks the submit button, during that time we come into the model phase. So during the model phase, user will type something here and they will click this command button. So there will be one command button, and that command button reads get customer info. So user clicks this and the data will be submitted to this same page again, and so that's what we call model phase once user submits it. So during the model phase, the data will get read and it gets stored inside the bean. And here if you see, this comes as a rendering phase. Why? Because here we are actually reading the content. So when JSF sees this output text, and when it knows that the value is customer info, it's a read-only field. That means we need to display the content. So once the form is submitted, and you will see the customer info, this is actually a get version, right? The fourth method we wrote in our bean. So it will make a call to that and it will return a string, and that string is rendered here in the rendering phase. So you will still see customer ID, customer name, zip, and whatever you typed, that get rendered here. Not only that, and you will see the content which is typed here also populated. Alright, so that's model phase. From model phase it read the data and all the processing takes place. Then it displays the form again, and so that time it performs rendering. So it reads all this and displays that in the corresponding field along with the output text. Alright, now it's demo time. We will go to demo and create this example. So this is the JSF page we created in the previous example. Now so we will use our same project which we created previously, and in the JSF intro we will create a new class. This class is going to act as a bean. Okay, we don't have any package, that means we will create one. So this class we are going to turn this as a managed bean. So managed bean is nothing but Java bean only. That's why here we are saying make sure the fields follow Java standard. First letter should be a smaller case when we are defining the properties. So that's for property. So here we defined 3 private string as a property. So we need both getters and setters after location zip. That's okay. So 3 private field and the properties are public here. Then we define get customer info. So even though there is no field, and if you see, this is still treated as a property. So this is one property. This property has both getter and setter version, and this property both getter and setter, and this is also both getter and setter version of the property. So since we have get and set, we have a field also, private field. Based on those only these properties operate. And here is one good example that a property cannot always associated to a single field. And if you see here, this is a property and this is associated to multiple field here. Of course, combination of all 3 field. So here the property is customer info. That means it will assemble all these internal fields, generates some output and throws it back. Alright, and if you see here, this is get, there is no set version here. That means customer info property is read only. Alright, now our bean is ready, and you can see this is the bean. The next step is creating the JSP project. Now we will right click, new, JSP file. JSF page 2. Here in the template we are choosing Java server faces page, JSF page. So JSP with HTML markup and a default view setup, and you can see the template here. So this stuff will get included. Alright, let's click finish. So we already saw, even though it shows error, it still works. And now we will go to web content. These stuffs and all explained in the previous video. Now we will go to faces config, double click and open it. So since our bean is ready, now we are going to make that bean as a managed bean, and we will choose, we can either choose a session or a request scope. Here let us use the session scope, and here I am clicking add, browse, and if you see, so it is displaying simple tag support from our JSP example. So to filter the class we will just type customer tube.codingexample.managedBean. Okay, it's coming from the correct package. Let us pick this. So use an existing Java class or create new Java class. You can, so here in this example, first we created the bean, but you can also create the bean here in this wizard itself. Since we created the bean, I am going with the first option, use an existing Java class. So click next, and name is customer, scope is session, because here I highlighted it, and the scope is displayed to store customer information. So let's click next. That's all, we are done with it. And you can see we created our customer bean as a managed bean, and it is scoped to session. So in our one of the servlet example, we talked about request, session and application. Since here we created a session scope, it will be the bean will live during the session in the sense that till you close the browser session, the bean will live. Alright, here managed bean name is customer, bean class, so that is coming from our package. We already created this bean, which contains 4 property, 3 read write and 1 is read only, and scope is a session scope. Here we selected that. Now we will save this, since you are seeing star mark here, right? So we are saving it. Now that's all required here. Okay, so we will open this again. We'll go to source also, and you can see the step whatever we performed here, that return something on the config file. So now we will study what it had written. So when we create the project with the JSF support, or we can say the step here in the managed bean added the entry whatever I deleted now. If you see here, managed bean description, this is what we typed in the managed bean section. Then bean name is customer, that's what we gave here, customer. Then managed bean class, we filtered and picked this, and scope decided as session. So in the slide, if you recall it, we used customer dot, right? So that's the name here is important. If you see here, managed bean name, what we are giving is customer. That means this customer we can refer inside the JSP page. Alright, now we will go to the JSP page. This bean code also required. Let us keep it. So it's stating insert title here, right? So I'll just say managed bean example. So it's just like our previous example. If you see here, we are still using the JSF tags view. So it's just like our previous example. If you see here, we have customer ID, name, zip. So these stuffs are already explained in the slide. And you can see how we are referring our customer bean. So the bean name is here customer. So that's how we are referring the customer bean. In faces config, we already mapped this customer. This refers to our class name customer on this specific package. So now JSF knows what is this customer ID, name, location, zip, and customer info. Right, now we will go ahead and publish this. Okay, first we will start. This will do publishing also. So you can see here Wildfly is started. Now this time we will execute our second JSF page. So there is a error, content abo f tag. Okay, we have to remove this view. Now it requires republishing. So we are seeing undeployed. Okay, now we are seeing deployed. We will take this and go to Internet Explorer. So this request, if you see, it includes faces, so it goes to the faces servlet, and faces servlet renders all this. And in the previous example, we saw how the H input text get transformed to input field. Alright, now we will type customer ID as 100, customer name ABC123, zip code 200 300. So the very first time when I invoked this JSP, here we are reading the resource from the server. These fields are not filled by user. That's why here there is nothing to display on this variable, and the call to this guest customer info comes here and it sees all this condition will fail. So we simply return the info and the info will be nothing. That's why here nothing is printed, or we can say nothing is printed here. Now let's click the get customer info button, and you can see that now both model and render phase occurs. During the model phase, the data goes to the bean, and from bean we read the information and we display it. And if you look at here, now let me change it to 4. And what happens during the model phase, so now I am going to submit this for the second time, or this is the third request. The very first request is a get. We want to get the resource JSF page 2. The second request is the form field post action. Now this one is the third request or second post. During the second post, we are changing this customer name. We appended 4 here. So what happens during model phase, all this information get stored to the corresponding Java bean. So that's what called model phase. During the rendering phase, we will retrieve the stored information and we will display that. And that's how when we click here, we see 4 here in the output, and we see that 4 get populated here as well. Why? Because the form completely got refreshed, right? You see, the entire page will get refreshed. So that means when it get displayed, so during the model phase, the data is read from here. During the render phase, the submitted information is retrieved. And since it is a session scope, we can see this information here. So what I mean to say is, let me open one more. So since it's a session scope, you can see that in a new tab, we again get all this information. Let me open one more tab. So same browser session. Now let me go to Edge. If you see, the Edge is completely a new session, so we won't get the information. That means we are not getting anything from the bean. All right. So that's all here in this video. Just now you saw the demo. Thank you for watching. Bye. And this will be our last video in the JSP tutorial. So we are ending the JSP tutorial, and we will see you people soon in some other series. Thank you for watching. Bye again.